Hi, I'm Oliver Gellis. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for OrthoFi. And in today's Blockbuster podcast with Dean, we're going to be talking about the importance of data and really how it affects what's going on now in your practice, how it will affect your practice in the future. And we're going to spend specific time talking about how it's affecting the nagging change in no-shows and how or why those are happening and how you can change some processes in your practice to mitigate that erosion. Looking forward to it.
OrthoMarketing.com, 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.
Well, hello everybody out in podcast land. This is Dean Steinman from Ortho Marketing. And guess what? We are back with another podcast for you. And I'm very stoked for today's podcast guest. You know me, I'm all about figuring out what's behind an onion and keep getting layers and layers and layers. And we're going to talk today with pretty well-known guy with a lot of great background about problems with appointments in the industry. I have Oliver Gellis. Oliver is a Chief Marketing Officer at OrthoFi, and he's very stoked to have him aboard. So, Oliver, how you doing today, bud?
Doing great, Dean. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, before we jump in a little bit, tell us your story. Tell us who is Oliver. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got into this crazy racket. Love to hear a little bit more about you.
Great. Yeah, it is a crazy racket, but I love it so much. I've been part of the dental industry as a whole for over 25 years, and next year will be my 20th year in orthodontics. It's been amazing. It's done amazing things for my family. I've learned so much and done so many different things in the industry that I've just got a great sense. I've developed products and solutions on the clinical side. I've spent the last 10 years really understanding and optimizing things for practices on the financial side. I just published a book back in April around practice management principles called Level the Curve, which has done really well and was for a minute there a bestseller on Amazon in different categories. So just happy to be able to give back.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I love this industry as well. I think I'm on my 13th or 14th year in it. And we're in the smile business, man. There's nothing better than making people smile, and that's a gift to be able to do that. So, every day I just look in the mirror and I smile and if you can make somebody smile and work with somebody whose job is to make people smile, boy, it's a no-brainer. It's a great thing there. So, we're, as you know, data is a king. Data decides everything. Data moves the world. So, talk to us a little bit about data from your perspective. How important is it at OrthoFi and what you do, and how you're seeing it move the industry?
Yeah. I mean, data is always important. It's always been important in an industry that defines itself as a relationship-driven industry, which happily it still is to a large extent. It seems like there's a conflict between that and data. That said, data could not be more important than it is right now. With all of the different changes and the different winds of change that are affecting the industry, understanding trends, understanding what's happening, and being nimble enough to address those changes head on is really what is going to help our specialty to thrive and survive.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about OrthoFi. What is, give everybody a little bit of background about the company. What is it that you guys do? A little shameless plug here. And, how is it that you guys are making a difference? I like to always have guests on who are difference makers and movers and shakers and disruptors. So let's talk a little bit about disrupting the industry, because nothing better than knocking off the old guard. So talk a little bit about the company and some of the things that you guys are doing now.
Yeah, I mean, disruptor very much describes OrthoFi when it first came out. One of our roles in the early times was to be mythbusters. We were going directly against a lot of the old held myths about flexibility in financing, what it took to convert patients. We were really one of the most ardent drivers of same day starts. Of course, same day starts existed before OrthoFi, but we like to feel like we have really helped to make it a household word, a mainstream concept that most practices are trying to adopt today. And it's really because of the data. We have a wonderful patient acquisition solution. We also do all of the revenue cycle management for our practices. So we get to see a lot of data coming in for our practices. We've, had over 1 million patients start in our system. We've had close to 2 million consult results go through our system. We've collected, we've processed over $5 billion of orthodontic production, and we know payment performance. All those patients that have started, we're tracking all of their payments, both from insurance and patients. So a lot of data crosses our transom, and we're blessed to have it because we can really help the industry, whether you're an OrthoFi user or not. Many people out there have probably heard me lecture, whether they're users or not, and we're happy to give back with that data.
Data is so important. I use that every day talking to our clients, and it's, there's KPIs across the board, and those don't know what that performance indicators, certain things that move the needle for any business. And if I don't know how many leads you get or how many starts you get, how many appointments you get and how many starts you get, then I'm not doing my job. And obviously data is important for any business. And and that's just mentioned there, leads. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the trend over the last year or so and what you've seen in it. From my perspective, competition is fiercer and bigger than ever. When I was at AAO back in, was it April, May, whatever it was, I walked out of that place, and to me, the underlying factor across the board was competition. There was more aligner companies, more software companies, more, this company, that company, more marketing companies than ever before, which is competition is good. It's healthy. But for a practice, an orthodontist who was one of the only guys in town or only had one or two competitors, now the competition is fierce. People that were referrers are now competition. You've got direct to consumer programs. You've got, big manufacturers marketing directly to the consumers to then try to deliver the leads to practices. So what have you seen over the last year and change as far as the industry in itself that has been kind of alarming for you?
I mean, there's been more change in the last 3 years, I would say, than there were in the prior 17 years of my career. And I know that sounds like a trite thing to say, but everything you mentioned is a factor. But then on top of that, there are a couple of other factors, and some of them are not talked about enough. For example, I've been lecturing a lot on the fact that there are less kids to treat this year, and there are going to be less kids to treat every year for the next 10 years based on the birth rate. Now, you may be in a community with a rising population due to population migration. Many of my fellow Californians are finding great homes in Texas and Tennessee and Idaho and Montana and Carolina and the Carolinas. And so those communities are growing from that migration. But as a whole in the US, we have fewer kids due to the birth rate for the last 10 years. So the next 10 years, we will have fewer kids to treat. What does that mean? That means either practices need to get better and more proactive about appealing to adults and converting adults better, and or they need to be able to win kids from their neighbor. So back to the competition example, if your TAM is getting smaller and you want to treat kids, there are fewer of them. So you better start actually winning more of them from your neighbor if that's the way you think you're going to win.
I'm butting heads with clients left and right about that same exact thing you just mentioned. They're like, well, they don't want to do any more adults. I only want to do kids. Well, do you want to grow your business, or do you want to grow just your kid part there? If your goal is to only bring in more kids and teens, you could do that, but you won't see the numbers from 2021 to 2022, 2018, 19. Those days are gone. If you want to grow your business, you have to adapt.
That's right.
So what's one bit of advice you would give a practice to adapt? how did they win that person back?
I mean, adapt or die, and the other part about competition we didn't talk about, which is not necessarily a bad guy because practices that are affiliating with groups are thriving and they're doing well. So I don't think, orthodontic service organizations are necessarily negative for our business. In fact, they might end up helping us to withstand a lot of the competitive pressures. But practices are no longer just competing against other sole proprietor practices. They are now competing against savvy, larger funded organizations that are constantly trying to get better, that are constantly adapting. So it's not just that they need to adapt to the market trends, but their competition in their local community is now for sure adapting and changing and improving at all times because that's what those organizations are tasked to do. So that's who they're competing with now.
They got a lot of money behind them. There's VC money behind every one of them, and when you're never going to compete dollar for dollar with them, so you need to think outside the box.
That's right.
And so you and I had a chat a few weeks ago, and we were talking about a big epidemic in the industry these days: no shows.
Yeah.
Okay, and from my perspective, I see this almost at an alarming rate of people that just don't show up. First of all, let's give me what you think is the playing field now when it comes to no shows, and why.
So our data, and you see some of this in Gauge data as well, is you've seen a steady erosion of what we call kept new exam rate. That essentially means of the people that schedule an exam, what percentage of them actually show up and complete that exam. The gold standard of the industry has always been 85%. We were originally in the early days at or above that, and over the last few years, it has eroded to where over the last 18 to 24 months, we saw it go from the mid 80s to the high 70s. And 8 points doesn't seem like that much, but 8 points is almost 10% fewer at bats. If you start from that mid 80s, number, that means you're getting a little bit less than 10% fewer at bats for every exam that you schedule. So it's not an insignificant thing.
It's not. And what do you think is causing the no show? Because they do their best, and clients, our clients, well, we confirm with them, and they blah 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 blah, and they still no show, and then they blame me because it was a bad lead. Okay, well, we booked it, when they didn't show up. Well, how did you confirm it, and blah blah blah. So, what do you think is one of the reasons that people just aren't just ghosting them and not showing up?
I mean, there are, as usual with everything, I'm sure there are a lot of factors. I mean, there's some human factors, there's some patient factors, there's some demographic factors, right? Practices are increasingly using online scheduling, which is a great thing, and I highly recommend it. But we probably can and should expect that there's going to be a little bit more erosion from that type of an exam scheduled. But largely, I can tell you this: we ran a lot of different things at this from a data standpoint, and what overwhelmed all of those other factors by a landslide was booking window, what we call booking window, which is the number of days between the time the patient calls and when their exam is scheduled. So how long are they having to wait to come in for an exam? That was an incredible epiphany that we had, and it was very demonstrative in the data, well beyond standard deviation. And what's interesting is it ties to what we also know is happening out there, which is the staffing crisis. So practices are finding it much, much harder to recruit and retain quality, both clinical team staff as well as admin staff. And so the convergence of those two things makes perfect sense. With a harder time having a full clinical team, practices are finding that they need to schedule patients out further and further. And the problem is that every day that a patient has to wait to come in decreases their likelihood of making it and actually coming in. And I will tell you the extreme, without going straight to the punchline, is if you're a practice and you're telling a patient that that their first available appointment is in 3 to 4 weeks, they will probably make that appointment. They will take the appointment. And then the next thing that patient will do is hang up, look online, find the next office listed, and call that practice and find the one practice that can see them the soonest. So you will at best have guaranteed yourself being the second look in that scenario, or they might not even show up at all.
All right, let's talk about the booking window. What is the ideal scenario for a booking window? How should you have every single day at a certain time open? I mean, double book, triple book? What's your solution to that?
Well, the first thing that we recommend is to open up more capacity, because I don't think that practices are sitting out there being lazy about scheduling and scheduling people out 3 to 4 weeks or more because they just want to or they don't want to see the patient. It's mostly because they believe that they don't have capacity. Now, one example of this is, practices are typically taking an hour to an hour and 15 per exam slot. That is far too long and it's unnecessary. We believe that you can have a very, very compelling exam using the right tools and getting the right information from the patient prior to their exam time, to where you can have a very effective and compelling exam in 45 minutes. If you think about going from an hour and 15 to 45 minutes, that adds a minimum of 1, if not 2 open slots per day, which if you go across the month, that pulls in a lot of different things. There's other obvious tools, using shorter virtual exams for adults or patients that are maybe less engaged, as a way of kind of proving their engagement prior to setting a full exam slot for them is good. Also, doctorless exams is a very effective tool that practices can be looking at for select patient populations, second sibling, OBS patients who have already come in several times. They probably don't need a full exam slot, and certainly not with a doctor. So you can multiply your capacity by having multiple exam rooms open with one doctor. That also creates a lot of capacity. So that's the first thing I would recommend practices do, is to open up more capacity and then target the right goals. So the ultimate that everyone should be trying to target, especially for adults who have a faster kept new exam erosion by the data, is 72 hours, 3 days. I know that sounds like crazy talk, but that's what the goal should be. What we see in our data is the top performing practices in terms of kept new appointment rate have a booking window of 14 days or less. So that as a general average, you should be at no more than 2 weeks. The practices that are well beyond that have a significant delta. There's a 20% lower delta for kept new appointment rate for practices that are getting into that 3 and more weeks timeframe.
It's a question as far as pre-qualification and getting data ahead of time. There's 2 schools of thought. One is, when a lead comes in from a marketing perspective, practices just want volume, but at the same time, they don't want the wrong people coming in. So, what do you think would be a good mix or match in order to not ask too much information from somebody? Because if you give somebody a 30-page, form to fill out before they show up, they're not going to do it. You also don't want to just get their name, phone number, email address, and then they show up and then you didn't get enough and they find out they haven't been to the dentist in 6 years, or they can't afford the $189 a month or whatever it is. So what do you think the happy median is as far as how much pre-qualification you could do? Because you just mentioned you want to try to make them be as efficient as possible before they come in. So where is that line, do you think, as far as how much to do beforehand or after? Because if I get something before a doctor, before I go and it's 10 pages, I'm like, I'm not filling this thing out, So
yeah, I think it's not so much the how. I mean, it is obviously, there is a how much limit, right? There is a threshold. I don't think many practices are in danger of breaching that for the most part. I think that the bigger question is, how do they get it, right? In what form? If you're sending someone physical forms to fill out, or you're sending them a big PDF that they have to fill out and then remember to, save and send to you, you're going to decrease your chances. It's got to be mobile friendly. It's got to be something that they can do on their mobile device that they're walking around with, that they can do at any time and probably can do right after they get off the call if it's efficient enough. So how is the big thing. The only important factor, other than the basic demographics that we have demonstrated has a decided impact of where they're going to come in, is the insurance verification. Not all patients have their insurance available when they call, but for the ones that do, it is best to get the 5 pieces of information needed to get a verification. The reason why that is we have proof with data that if a patient knows that they have coverage prior to coming in for their exam, not only are they far more likely to actually come in, but it actually increases the conversion rate with that patient by 14 points, meaning from 58% to 72%. It doesn't even matter. The data is interesting. It doesn't matter how much coverage they have, whether it's $200 or $2,000. The threshold is whether they have coverage at all or they know they have coverage. So even if they don't have coverage, knowing that ahead of time, meaning getting it early so that you can do the check, so that you can get back to them prior to their exam date and tell them, hey, congratulations, you have coverage that you can apply towards your treatment. We're really excited to see you. Just being able to say that increases your conversion rate.
So many times I listen to phone calls when a person calls up and says, do you take XYZ insurance? And the practice says, no, we don't. They hang up. That is a perfect buying opportunity for them to say, no, but we work with you, or we do take this, or we have other options. It's incredible the amount of people who are not trained the right way on how to do so. We talk about the staff problem. Staff, in my eyes, is the biggest hole in every practice across the board. They're trained on how to make teeth straighter. They're not trained on sales and not trained on processes and what have you. And by far, that is, I find, the biggest hole in every practice.
Absolutely.
One final question for you. Unless you put on your super fantastic future glasses here and look into the future, and let's look in maybe say 2 years from now, where do you see the industry as far as trends, and what should a practice owner be focusing on or looking at that you see coming down the road?
Yeah, so I don't want to apply any good or bad to this. I think that the numbers are pretty clear. I think one of the things we're going to see is that an industry that right now is about 10% affiliated, we're probably going to look up in a few years and it's going to be 20% affiliated. So that affiliation mix is going to double. That is going to, further push a lot of these pressures and trends, right? Again, these corporations are not buying things just to buy them; they're buying things to grow them, and so we're going to see a lot of this stuff.
Do you mean actually being part of a DSO, OSO?
Yes, consolidation, exactly. So we're going to see a lot more practices be part of groups, and that will change their operating behavior. It will change technology that's used. A lot of these, larger groups are, pushing hard into technology areas like monitoring, becoming more efficient. So if you wanted to stay at and ahead of that trend and compete, I would highly recommend practices be looking into a lot of those different technologies. Monitoring, for example, I have no stake in any monitoring company at all, but I believe that monitoring is a tool that has to be paid attention to. And it has great potential if leaned into and leveraged correctly to create capacity, to create patient-friendly benefits, right? Patients really don't want to come in if they don't have to. And so being able to market that we have technology that allows us to effectively monitor you without having to, take you out of work or take your kid out of school is something very impressive that can be marketed. It has amazing business benefits as well. So that's just like one example of technology that I think we will lean into more, and it will have great benefits.
I agree. I just finished my treatment, and I was on DM, and it was a game changer for me. I mean, I love my orthodontist, but I saw him 3 times in 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm busy. I'm sure a busy mom who's got 2-3 kids who's got to show up and sit down and says, okay, liners look good. See you in 6 weeks. What? I had to pull you out of school and stop this and that. So you got to adapt there and use that. Three quick final questions. Question one is, if you have the ability to have lunch with anybody in the history of the world, who are you having lunch with?
Oh man, that's a really tough question. One of them is personal. My grandfather, who's my life hero, passed away when I was still young, and I would, love to have one more chance to spend an afternoon with him, to kind of compare notes with all that I know in my life now, and so that's definitely one for me. I think there are some people that got a shorter time than they were allotted. I'd love to see, what Martin Luther King thinks about where we're at in today's world.
Well,
He's just a great guy, and as crazy as it sounds, and as all over the place as he is, I do like
yeah.
the evil genius types, and so I would love to have lunch with Elon Musk.
Yes, I agree. He's personally one way or the other, but the guy's a genius. Changed the world. And it takes a certain type of person that could do that. Just the you know, Tesla is the coolest thing ever. I heard this great quote the other day. It's a great program for a phone and whatever. So calling it an iPhone a telephone is like calling a Tesla a cup holder.
That's right.
You know,
Cool.
so it's good quality. And so it's funny you say grandfather. I asked this question maybe 8-10 times in the last bunch of times, and 4 or 5 people said their grandpa
Really?
as the first answer. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's which is great. And would you go back if you're doing this? Would you do it now or go back when he was young?
Ooh, that's a cool one. I would go back now because he amassed a lot of wisdom, and I feel like I'm a changed guy since when I lost him at age 10, and I would love to compare notes with him now.
Good answer. All right, two two other final questions there. Um, you're on a desert island. All right, this is how everybody gets to know Oliver. You're on a desert island for a year. You get to bring one movie and one record with you.
Wow. Everybody knows that I'm a crazy movie fan, so pinning me to one is almost impossible. I'm going to say Goodfellas,
Okay.
and you said one movie and one what?
One record, one album.
One album. Uh, Siamese Dream
Yeah.
by the Smashing Pumpkins.
Okay, interesting. All right, cool. All right. And then finally, one that which kind of always is the insight to people's soul is you just saw a text that an asteroid's hitting Earth in 2 hours from now. So you have to make your last meal. What are you eating?
I'm a cook, so I
Okay.
would make an Italian meal. If I had one dish, I'd make my famous carbonara.
Ooh, it's like to watch The Office. I love the gabagool. The, I love the gabagool. The gabagool. That's awesome. So, Oliver, hey man, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate this. Was great insight. I love the way you think. I love how passionate for the data and technology and change. So thank you so much. If somebody wants to just learn more about you, follow you, pick your brain, what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you and just to, ask you any questions or wants to get more information on OrthoFi?
Yeah,
Go ahead
I
yourself.
mean, if you want information on OrthoFi, best and easiest way is startsmoresmiles.com. But I am always happy to entertain conversations about trends in the industry personally. You can reach out directly at oliver.gellis, Gelles, at orthofi.com. I'm happy to always chat with people, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to chat with people there as well.
So Oliver, you guys are always having different programs and different conferences. So tell me a little bit about Nexus. What's that all about?
It's our annual meeting. It is a fabulous business focused meeting. A lot of people think it might be just a day and a half sell on OrthoFi. It is anything but that. It is all about the data. It's all about the trends. And so we dive into the trends that are going, and we have some of the best speakers in the industry that help guide you not just to understand the trends, but to what to do about them and how to actually implement processes that you can start doing on Monday morning. It is a Monday morning changing meeting.
So somebody wants to, obviously learn a little bit more about that and, maybe get a ticket, show up or whatever it is. How do they go about to learn more?
So Nexus is being held February 1st through the 3rd in 2024 at the Gaylord Convention Center in Denver. It's a fabulous location. Lots of great things to do there. And if you want to learn more, go to startmoresmiles.com, go to resources, find our events, and you'll see Nexus. You'll learn everything about it. You'll see all of our fabulous speakers, over 20 industry leading speakers, and have a chance to register. So we'd love to see you there.
Awesome. Everybody check that out too. So everybody out there, thanks so much for listening. Reach out. It's a great company. I have many, many, many clients who are using OrthoFi, and they've got just incredible things to say about it. And I've obviously following Oliver for a long time on social media. I'm very happy to finally have him on board. So thanks so much for the insight and for making people smile and think. So Oliver, thanks so much. Everybody out there, be happy, be smart, be safe, And once again, go Jets. Thanks. Bye-bye.
OrthoMarketing.com. 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.